It was a few years ago. I met a woman named Karen. She was of average height with brown hair and big eyes, and she always tried to smile. In fact, whenever she came to a meeting, no one in the room felt the need to adjust their posture or demeanor. When Karen spoke, everyone looked away without paying her any attention. They even interrupted her constantly, quite casually. It was as if she weren't even there, or as if no one really cared whether she could finish her sentence or not. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest thing was that Karen was actually the hardest working person in that room. And at the same time, I was working with a woman named Lisa in the same position at the same company. In fact, their titles were the same, and they were very likely in roughly the same pay bracket. But the moment Lisa walked into a room, everything changed instantly. Even if no one could quite put their finger on it, everyone's posture would start to shift. Many would sit up straighter, or if they were speaking, they'd slow down, and all eyes would turn to Lisa, without them even realizing it. Now let's consider this scenario. Was Karen less intelligent? Of course not. Or did she have less experience? Not that either. If we were to say she was less beautiful, well, that's definitely not what this conversation is about. The clear difference between the two was this. Karen had spent a very large part of her life trying to survive by making others happy. In other words, she was constantly striving to be accepted, especially to be loved. And generally speaking, this effort, often without her even realizing it, constantly sent a clear message to the outside world. You are the ones who must approve of me. It feels like I'm not enough on my own. Lisa, on the other hand, moved with a constant ease, as if carrying an unknown strength from within, and clearly demonstrated that she felt no need to prove this to anyone. So the difference between them actually showed us very clearly why so many things had changed. And this is exactly where I need to tell you something, though I know it might not be easy to hear. How people treat you is, believe me, largely a matter of what you've taught them. In other words, every day, without even realizing it, we're teaching the people around us how to behave. Through how you react to us when we back down and what you silently accept, by showing what upsets you and revealing what you care about most, we're actually doing this. Studies conducted in the US have repeatedly proven the same thing to us. When people evaluate one another, especially with very little information and in a hurry, they make biased judgments, often within the first 2 or 3 seconds, and during that brief moment, it's not what you say that matters, but rather how you stand, where you direct your gaze, the tone of your voice, and how much space you occupy in the room, all of which are clearly understood. And sometimes we can all see that thousands of hours of effort are overshadowed by just those 3 or 5 seconds of presence. What I'm saying might sound a bit unfair, but unfortunately, it's the truth. So throughout this video, I'll clearly explain exactly what you're doing wrong. These aren't mere guesses or some other preconceived notions. I can say they're consistent patterns I've observed over the years through my experiences with different women. And once you've seen a pattern, it's not really possible to ignore it anymore. Sometimes this can feel heavy, but believe me, it's much better than not knowing. So I recommend you watch this video all the way through, because especially in point 7, there's something that, unfortunately, many people never think about, yet it makes a huge difference in daily life. And once you get there, you'll understand what I mean and why I didn't mention it from the start. Let's get right to the first point. 1. How you view yourself is the most important factor in determining how others view you. I'm going to tell you something truly sincere. People don't first observe you and then decide how to treat you. In fact, the opposite is true. They first look at how you treat yourself, and then rest assured they'll treat you the same way. Now, what I'm saying might sound like an abstract idea at first, but I actually want you to look back at any period of your life. There are times when you feel small. How did people treat you during those times? Or there are times when you're truly confident in yourself, when everything seems to be going smoothly. Think about how the people around you treated you and looked at you during those times. There's likely a big difference between the two. And that change actually began when you, in a real sense, changed. In social psychology, this phenomenon is called self-confidence cues. In other words, when you give off certain signals through your behavior, the people around you subconsciously respond to those signals in a way. A very detailed study conducted in 2001 by Cameron Anderson and his colleagues reveals this truth. When people assess someone's status, they rely on that person's own internal consistency of posture and behavior as the most reliable source of information. This has nothing to do with titles, appearance, or money. It's about a person's consistency. Now, I want you to really think about this for 3 to 5 seconds. Let me put it this way. When you look in the mirror in the morning, what emotions are actually going through your mind? Do you judge yourself in some way? Do you think things like, "I look tired today," or "Would I be better off if I were a little thinner?" Many women believe this is just a very private inner voice between themselves and themselves. No one hears it or knows about it. However, this inner voice actually manages to surface in some way throughout the entire day, in every interaction. It's very quiet, subtle, yet quite clear. It even becomes evident in the very first glance of your eyes or in how you respond when someone compliments you on any subject. What I'm trying to say is this. The kind of relationship you have with yourself is exactly what you project outward. I'm not saying this to blame anyone. On the contrary, it means this. I'm talking about a situation you can change. Because, as you know, there's never a need to seek validation from others, nor is there a need to wait for someone else to see you differently. When you fix something from within, you'll always see that positive responses come from the outside. Change the way you talk to yourself. This isn't naivety. It isn't self-deception either. It's about changing the source of your behavior. And when the source changes, everything that flows from it changes. Something's caught my attention. Most viewers stay here but leave without subscribing. Honestly, this saddens me a bit. If these videos are helpful to you, tap the button in the bottom right corner to join us. That way, neither I lose you nor do you miss out on this content. Thank you so much in advance for your support. 2. A woman who doesn't set boundaries doesn't earn respect. She ends up carrying a burden. There's a woman named Margaret who's 43 and manages a small team of nearly 50 people. She dresses very neatly, comes to work early every morning, takes notes diligently in meetings and always says, "Of course," when asked. Or, whenever something is offered to her, I've never seen her turn it down. She would constantly respond to messages over the weekend, and if someone, for example, asked for something, you could tell from her eyes that she'd already offered to do it before the question, "Can you do this?" had even been asked. Because saying no felt like a situation that went against her nature. It was as if she felt guilty, and disappointing someone seemed far worse to Margaret than being asked to do something. Of course, a lot of time had passed, and the team had grown steadily. But Margaret hadn't changed her ways. She was still the same Margaret. However, she had come to realize something. People who worked less were constantly getting promoted and passing her by. Even in meetings, her ideas would just hang in the air, and if someone else said the exact same thing 5 minutes later, they'd somehow get a positive response. The saddest part was this. When people wanted something from her, they no longer even asked nicely. They just assumed she'd do it. One day, when we were alone, she said to me, "Why doesn't anyone show me any respect? After all, I do everything for everyone." I looked at her gently and said, "That's exactly why." In other words, the absence of boundaries is not a sign of kindness. Listen to what I'm saying very carefully, because society doesn't tend to view someone who sets no boundaries as a virtuous person. Instead, they mentally label that person as someone who is endlessly available. This isn't because they're bad people. It's simply an automatic social reflex of the brain. So it's like, where do you stop, rather than up to that point? Unfortunately, this is a very evolutionary thing. And here's another reality. Testing boundaries is essentially an instinctive behavior designed to understand where resources end. I also want to emphasize that the situation I'm describing isn't limited to the workplace. It applies to various segments of society as well. It applies at home, in your relationship, and in friendships. Generally speaking, any relationship where you don't set boundaries is bound to fall into the same pattern over time. Because this is what happens. You're constantly giving while the other person remains in the receiving position. 3. Over-explaining definitely leads to a loss of power. Let me give an example. I can't come today because, well, there's actually this situation. It's not really that important, but on the other hand, I need to consider this, and normally I wouldn't do this, but this time, stop right here. Actually, did you notice what happened as you finished that sentence? The person across from you didn't ask you a single question. They didn't apply any pressure. He just stayed silent, and you crumbled under the pressure to fill that silence. You started apologizing before the sentence was even finished, before anything had even happened. So the critical question here is, where does this come from? Most of the time, it comes from childhood. You learned that whenever you wanted something or refused something, you needed a good enough reason. The question, why don't you want it, couldn't be left unanswered. Because I don't want to, wasn't enough. And this lesson stayed with you as you grew up. Now you might be in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, but that pattern is still there. It's still at work. Of course, there's also this. Over-explaining is a defense mechanism. And defense is only used by people who feel accused. The person across from you processes this subconsciously. You make a decision, and immediately afterward, 3 sentences of explanation follow. The brain registers this. So this person doesn't fully trust their own decision. So they need my approval. And the next time they want something from you, they'll ask more comfortably, because they've seen the door is ajar. Think about this. How do the people you respect most in life explain their decisions? At length? I thought this. I evaluated that. I also considered this. I hope that makes sense. No. They're usually brief. They're clear. Instead of explaining, they state it. And this brevity isn't indecision. On the contrary, it's the outward reflection of an inner clarity. Also, a strong response is brief. I'm not available today. I'll take a different approach on this. This isn't right for me. Period. Additional information can be provided if necessary, but not up front, only if asked. And this small difference fundamentally changes how people perceive you within weeks. Moreover, when you over-explain, the person you're talking to might not even be listening. They're just waiting. Will they say yes or no? And while you get lost in those long sentences, the real message has already flown away. The words of the one who speaks briefly stick in the mind. It's not the long speaker's words that stick in the mind, but the fact that they spoke at length. In the end, practically speaking, you can start by trying this week. When you need to refuse something or make a decision, cut it off with a single sentence. A voice inside you will say, "Let me explain a little more." Recognize that voice and let it pass. Your sentence is over. Put a period. Watch what happens. Most of the time, the person across from you will just nod and move on, because in reality, they weren't expecting any of that long explanation. You were doing it for yourself, to seek approval, and you no longer need it. 4. Your body language tends to speak much louder than your words. Before I begin this very important point, let me first clarify this. When you walk into a room, even before you've uttered a single word, everyone in that room has already begun to assess you. This isn't a conscious process, it's automatic. It happens in milliseconds, and what you say plays no role in that initial assessment, because you haven't said anything yet. For example, are your shoulders slumped? Do your eyes look away first? When you sit down, do you sit as if you're asking for permission? Are you standing there unsure of where to put your hands? All of these are messages. Silent but clear messages. And the people around you are picking up on these messages. They process this information faster than you do. Looking at it from another angle, a 2010 study by Amy Cuddy and her colleagues at Harvard revealed something striking. A closed, hunched body posture doesn't just change the message you send to the outside world. It raises cortisol levels, the stress hormone, in the body and lowers testosterone levels, which are associated with self-confidence. So if you stand in a closed-off way, you're not just appearing that way. You're physically feeling that way too. The body influences the mind. It's not just the mind affecting the body. Of course, this is important, because you might be thinking, if I feel good, my posture will naturally improve. But the research says the opposite. If you improve your posture, you can feel better. The direction works both ways. Now is the time for more concrete examples. Sitting at a desk with your shoulders slumped forward. Avoiding eye contact while speaking. Slightly shrinking back when someone says something. Clasping your hands, covering them, hiding them. These may seem like small things, but collectively they determine whether people perceive you as safe or strong. And the difference between these two categories directly shapes how you're treated. Also, there's this. Body language isn't just about how you stand. It's also about what you do in moments of reaction. Someone is belittling you, saying something unfair, or cutting you off. What does your body do in that moment? Most of the time your shoulders slump, your chin tucks in, and your voice drops. It's as if your brain is saying, there's danger, shrink. And the moment you shrink back, the person across from you subconsciously registers a message. I can do this. But standing tall in that very moment sends a completely different message. You don't even need to speak up or defend yourself. Your posture simply doesn't change, that's all. Yet that unchanging posture sends the most powerful message, both inwardly and outwardly. Never forget that correcting your posture isn't about being arrogant, it's about claiming your space. Sitting at the table without slouching, not averting your eyes while speaking, distributing your weight evenly while standing, keeping your hands in a visible, calm position. You can apply these right now, at this very moment. There's no need to wait for something to change. There's no need to wait for a certain mood to come over you. Decide and do it. The body leads the way. The feelings follow. 5. Waiting for approval gives others great power. Now, here's the situation, friends. There was a friend of mine whose mother, I won't mention her name, but I can't skip this point without telling her story. She was a 58-year-old retired teacher. She'd taught children for many years, a patient, thoughtful, well-read woman. But she needed her surroundings' approval for nearly every decision in her life. When choosing clothes, when cooking, when planning a vacation, even when arguing with her own daughter, even when she was right, she'd ask herself, am I overreacting? One day she said to me, what will everyone say? I looked at her and asked, how long have you been asking yourself that? There was a long silence. Then, always. You've probably noticed it too, and that's exactly where the problem lay. Not just in asking that question. She'd been asking that question for so long, so automatically, that she didn't even notice it anymore. When she woke up in the morning, before thinking, what should I wear, she thought, what will people say? Before making a decision, she calculated how others would react to it rather than the decision itself. She wasn't at the center of her own life. There was an imaginary audience in other people's minds. The truth is, the urge to seek approval is an evolutionary trait. You need to understand that first. Historically, belonging to a group meant survival. Being excluded from the group was dangerous. So the brain has a good reason to generate this anxiety. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But you also need to understand this. You no longer need your neighbor's approval to survive. You don't need your colleague to like your outfit. You don't need your family to agree with every decision you make. The brain still senses the old danger. But the danger isn't there anymore. And every time you seek approval, you're reacting to a danger that doesn't exist. In addition, Stoicism has a sharp point to make right here. Look at what Epictetus wrote. There are things you can control and things you can't. What others think falls into the second category. When you invest energy there, you're giving it power, and that power doesn't come back to you. Furthermore, a large portion of the mental energy of someone seeking approval isn't focused inward. It's focused outward, in someone else's mind. What did they think of it? Did they misunderstand? Did they not like it? While these questions swirl, the real work isn't getting done. Real decisions aren't being made. Real life isn't being lived. And people sense this. Even if they can't see it clearly, they sense it somewhere. This person isn't confident, they think, and they act accordingly. Ultimately, what others think is sometimes important. Feedback is valuable. But approval and feedback are not the same thing. Feedback provides information. Approval allows you to exist. And you don't need anyone's permission to exist. 6. Your reaction. Time clearly reveals your inner world. Let me give an example. Someone says something rude to you. They make an unfair criticism, or they simply ignore you, and you respond immediately. You immediately go on the defensive, or on the contrary, you immediately apologize. You immediately soften. You back down immediately. That immediately says a lot. Actually, at that moment, neurologically speaking, this is what happens. In situations requiring an immediate response, the brain operates through the amygdala rather than the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex handles logic, evaluation, and long-term thinking. The amygdala, however, is the survival reflex. Detect a threat, respond immediately. This mechanism was designed for real dangers, physical dangers, but the brain isn't very good at distinguishing social threats from physical ones. If someone belittles you in a meeting, the amygdala sounds the alarm as if you were facing a threat, and you act on that alarm. Naturally, the person across from you senses this, always. The moment they realize they can trigger you, they mentally note it. It's not a conscious plan. But in the next interaction, that information is still there. This person is sensitive about this. This approach works. And sometimes intentionally, sometimes completely unconsciously, they press that button again. Essentially, the people you respect the most, the ones you listen to the most. What do they do when they're criticized? Do they immediately go on the defensive? Do they raise their voices? Or do they pause for a moment? Do they assess the situation? Then, at their own pace, in their own voice, do they respond? Most likely the second option. And that pause, that brief moment of waiting, determines the respect you have for them, whether you realize it or not. Rest assured, intentionally slowing down your reaction time is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it's the ability to respond from the cortex rather than the amygdala. This isn't easy, because reacting in the moment feels much more natural. It provides short-term relief. You said it, it's over. But what does it leave in the long run? What will happen the next time the person across from you does the same thing? Will you give the same reaction again? And when will this cycle end? You can try what I'm saying, for example. When someone bothers you, take 3 deep breaths before responding. Those 3 breaths might feel like an eternity. The feeling that I need to say something right now wells up inside you. But that feeling passes. And what do you feel afterward? Most of the time, this. Actually, I didn't need to respond. Or, if I had responded, I would have said something different. Of course, that's the difference. The difference in those 3 breaths determines which part of your brain kicks in, and no one sees what's going on inside you in that moment. But what you say afterward, how you say it, and even the way you choose whether to speak or not, everyone sees all of that, And what's seen shapes how people perceive you, how much they take you seriously, and how they'll approach you next time. In addition to this isn't just about reactions to rude people. It's also about reactions to praise. When someone compliments you, do you immediately say, "No, really, I'm not"? When someone tells you you did a good job, do you start downplaying your own achievements? This is also a matter of reaction speed, and this reaction sends the same message: I don't deserve this. The other person will give you less next time because you're already rejecting it. Slow down in every direction, with both criticism and praise, with both pressure and kindness. Choose your reactions. This isn't about control, it's about clarity. 7. You need to learn to use silence wisely. Yes, here we are. Stop right here. Don't skip this point. I want to start with a harsh truth. Most women interpret silence as a sign of a problem. If the conversation stops, it means something is wrong. If the person across from you isn't responding, they're either upset or don't care about you. You said something, the room went quiet, and a voice inside you says, "Fill this gap, fast." And you fill it. But have you ever thought about what you're losing in that moment of filling the silence? As many of us might guess, silence feels uncomfortable because it makes us feel out of control. When you speak, at least you know what's happening. When you stay silent, you don't know what's being thought. And uncertainty is a greater threat to most people than silence itself. But here's the critical part. When you can tolerate that uncertainty, you're unconsciously leaving a very powerful impression on the other person. Looking at it from another angle, research reveals an interesting finding. A study published in the Journal of Human Behavior found that the party that maintained silence for longer in negotiation settings achieved better results. Why? Because silence makes the other side speak, and the speaking party usually explains more, gives more, and sometimes even backs down from their own position just to fill that void. Of course, now apply this to your daily life. Someone says something unfair to you. A voice inside you says, "Respond immediately." But you don't respond, you just look. A calm, clear gaze. 3 seconds, 5 seconds. What happens during that time? Most of the time, the other person gets uncomfortable. They start explaining. "What I meant was, actually it's not like that. It might have been misunderstood," they say. Without saying a word, simply by remaining silent, you're putting the other person on the defensive. Essentially, this isn't manipulation. It's clarity. When you're calm enough within yourself, you don't feel the need to fill every silence, and this calmness shows on the outside. People don't read this as coldness, but often as gravity. This person has something to say and is weighing it, they think. They listen to the one who speaks little, not the one who speaks loudly. Also, don't forget this. Silence is a powerful tool not just in moments of conflict, but in everyday conversations as well. When someone tells you something, you don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to come up with a solution right away. You don't have to share your own experience right away. You can just listen. You can truly listen. And this genuine listening fundamentally changes how people feel about you. When they walk away, they feel something. They say, "This woman heard me." That feeling is rare, and rare things are valuable. Ultimately, learning to use your silence well doesn't happen overnight, because that "fill this void" voice is powerful, but each time you can wait just 1 more second despite it, then 2 seconds, then 5, and over time you'll notice that silence no longer bothers you. Instead, something settles inside you, a clarity, a weight, and people sense it, always. 8. Everyone notices where you spend your energy. Danielle was a 39-year-old marketing director. She lived in a neighborhood near Evanston on Chicago's north side. She had short, dark brown hair. She was a quick thinker, a fast talker, the kind of person who always had the last word in every meeting. It was clear she was smart and energetic, but that energy seemed to flow in the same direction almost all the time, toward complaining. About a colleague's unfairness, a client's rudeness, a driver's behavior in traffic, a wrong decision the company made, that meeting from last week, that comment from 2 months ago. When Danielle talked about these things, she was truly convincing. The injustices were real, the criticisms were mostly valid. But one thing caught my attention. There's also this reality. During a meeting with her team, I looked around. Who was standing next to Danielle? Who went out to lunch with her? Who came over to her after the meeting to ask a question? Almost no one. Of course, when I told Danielle this, she resisted at first. But these are real problems. Isn't it normal to share them? Yes, I said, real problems. But think about this. What do you get in return when you share these problems? A momentary sense of relief. Someone saying, yes, you're right. And then, the problem is still there. The energy is gone, and the people around you, without realizing it, have started to drift away from you. Here's the thing. Energy is something you can sense. Most people don't say it out loud, but everyone feels it. People notice whether they feel lighter or heavier when they're around someone. They aren't making a conscious decision. But over time, they learn to ask themselves, how do I feel when I'm with this person? And that feeling determines how they treat you. Drained energy isn't attractive, not just in romantic relationships, but in every relationship. The person who constantly complains, constantly carries a burden, and constantly says how hard it is, eventually finds their circle of people emptying out. And that person usually doesn't realize it. People have abandoned me, they say, but actually people have drifted away, slowly, without them noticing, because the brain conserves energy. It moves away from what drains it. Essentially, what I'm asking here is, where did most of your energy go today? Into what you created, into the problem you solved, into the connection you built, or into repetitive complaints, an event stuck in the past, or something you can't change? You need to ask this honestly, because the answer explains your surroundings. I'm not saying to completely stop complaining. Sometimes you need to name something. Sometimes saying it out loud brings clarity. But say it once, maybe twice. On the third time, stop and ask, where is this taking me? If it's taking you nowhere, let it go. Redirect your energy elsewhere. Toward the solution, toward the flow, toward what you're creating, toward what you're building. Remember, Danielle started doing this. It wasn't easy. Complaining was such a habit for her that when she stopped, she felt empty for a while. What am I going to talk about now? She asked. And that question was actually very valuable, because as that emptiness began to fill, it filled with different things, ideas, questions, curiosity, and the people around her noticed it, slowly. But they noticed. Your energy is a resource, a limited resource. Where you invest it determines what you get in return, and this choice is made every day in small ways. 9. A woman who can say no is definitely treated differently. I'd actually like to start by asking you something. What do you feel inside when you say the word no? Wait, really think about it. Anxiety, guilt, a feeling like, will they get angry now? And after you say it, do you immediately start with but? Do you try to soften it right away? Do you feel the need to add something right away? I know where that feeling comes from, I think. Most likely you were told this too. Good people help others. A kind woman says yes. Being accommodating is a virtue. You don't want to be a difficult person. You don't want to seem selfish. And these ideas took root so early, so deeply, that saying no has turned into a physical reaction. Your heart races, your hands might get a little sweaty, your tone of voice changes, as if you were facing a real danger. But realize this, that danger isn't real, there's just a word. And hesitating so much to say, that word is costing you a lot. You can be sure of this. The person asking you for something often knows, without even realizing it. This woman isn't the type to say no. Where does this knowledge come from? From every yes in the past. From every time you reluctantly agreed. From every moment a boundary was crossed and you remained silent. People don't learn this by testing you. They learn by observing. And once they've learned it, that knowledge doesn't change until you change it. After all, what happens when you constantly make saying yes a necessity? The value of what you give decreases. Think about it. How valuable is the yes from someone who says yes every time you ask? What do you feel inside when you hear it? Gratitude. Or they were going to say it anyway. Now think the opposite. How does the yes from someone who generally acts within their own boundaries and sometimes says no make you feel? Different, very different, because it's a choice. And being chosen is entirely different from being the default. Never forget this. Saying no isn't aggression, nor is it a defense. It's about protecting your own value system, knowing what truly suits you and what doesn't, and being able to say it with a calm, clear voice. And the woman who does this leaves a different message in her surroundings. This person has boundaries. This person doesn't give everything to everyone. This person's yes carries meaning. 10. Consistency helps build reputation. Quickly. Here's the reality. People don't just observe you once. They observe you repeatedly. And what they see accumulates. This accumulation I'm talking about is essentially a silent process. No one is taking notes. No one is intentionally tracking you. But the brain looks for patterns, always. It's looking for an answer to the question, what does this person do and when? And when it finds the answer, it adjusts its approach to you accordingly. When it can't find the answer, it creates distance. Because staying away from the unpredictable is the brain's default response. Right here, let me tell you about a woman. Her name was Teresa. She was 51 years old, a mother of two, and ran an accounting firm in a small town. She wore glasses, spoke calmly, and never seemed in a hurry. To be honest, she seemed like an ordinary person when I first met her, but over time I noticed something. Teresa did exactly what she said she would do. When she said, "I can't do this," she really didn't do it. When she said, "I'll think about it," she really did think about it. When she said, "This isn't right for me," she didn't try to make it work a week later. Later on, in particular, I paid close attention to the people around her, to how they treated her. They asked her questions carefully. They waited for her answer. They didn't interrupt her, and this respect didn't come from her intelligence, her title, or her appearance. It came from her consistency, a consistency built over the years through small, steady decisions. I also want to say this. You don't have to be perfect. You really don't. You'll make mistakes. You'll have moments of weakness. One day you'll set a boundary. The next day that boundary will be tested. One day you'll stay calm. A week later, you'll react to a small thing. This will happen. But consistency doesn't mean never make a mistake. Consistency means the overall line is maintained. How you stood today, you'll stand roughly the same way tomorrow. The boundaries remain in place. Your body language feels familiar. Your tone of voice doesn't change. This familiarity eventually turns into predictability. Predictability leads to trust. Trust leads to respect. After these 10 points, I'd like to briefly summarize. The things I'm talking about are definitely not some theory. As I said, these are clear patterns. And you're already within these patterns, whether right now, in a moment, or even every day, whether you realize it or not. I'd like to ask you something sincerely regarding this video. Which point did you feel most connected to? If you paused for a moment and thought, "This is about me," then I want you to start with that point. Just one step, just this week, by making a single change. In the comments, write which point you identified with the most, the one that resonated with you the most, because I'm genuinely curious, and the answers to this question will actually shape what this channel produces moving forward. Send this video to a friend, especially someone who's asked, "Why do people treat me this way?" The answer is here. And don't forget, you change before others' behavior toward you changes. You always come first. Friends, if this video truly added something to your life, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourselves, because true change begins with how you see yourself. See you in the next video. And remember this, when a woman chooses her own path, she transforms not only her life, but everything around her.